Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Thursday. I'm delighted to be here with John Paul Mason. We're here to talk for an hour about all things Celtic. Where that takes us, who knows, JP? It's been one of those seasons. Who knows what's going to happen next? Last night was quite the evening in terms of Celtic. I was on my way to Glasgow and we find out Nancy has been announced, and you're thinking, right, so O'Neill definitely is getting his last chance here. We win the game, results elsewhere go our way. We're top of the league, other than a wee bit of goal difference. What a job Martin O'Neill has done.
Absolutely incredible. And I had to stop watching a video that Celtic have just posted there before I burst into tears.
Which one? The one in the changing room?
Yeah.
Yeah. I did watch it all the way through, so I'm not telling you.
I got to my head and I was like, I didn't want to be an absolute mess coming on here because.
JP, how can football have that effect on you?
Well, it's incredible. It can when you've. I mean, maybe for some of the younger support, it might not hold that. Maybe it will, but it might not hold that same kind of sentiment. But my God, a guy that's been connected with Glasgow Celtic Football Club for pretty much my entire adult life, like since I was 20. And if you remember going back to when he was appointed, when that insane news came out of nowhere that Martin O'Neill was coming back, can you remember my fear of what might or might not happen in terms of his appointment? Because when we sat here on that Thursday, I mean, did it happen on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, like of that week?
It would have been a Tuesday because wait a minute now. Was it not a Monday night?
That was Monday night.
It was a Monday night event, aye. It all came out on the same night as the statement. Yeah,
so basically I had like 2 days to kind of process what was going on. And I was just genuinely worried that he was going to tarnish, not he was going to tarnish his legacy, but Celtic were going to tarnish his legacy. Because let's face it, there's absolutely no way that anybody, including Dermot Desmond, could have thought that it would have gone as it's gone in the last 5-6 weeks. There's no way he was making that phone call that day, knowing full well that it would end like this, in terms of he's got no control over other teams dropping points, and he's certainly got no control over what happens in and around the dressing room. Mark Fotheringham, Sean Maloney, Steve McManus could quite easily have been, failures as well. There's no guarantee that was going to be a success, but the way that it's ended is just almost perfect. I mean, I can absolutely accept the Michelin game as a bridge too far.
Yeah.
But everything else has just been like, and yeah, okay, the football's not been scintillating, but as he said repeatedly, it's about winning. And nobody would be sitting here 6 weeks on thinking, oh, we played so well in that 2-2 draw at Easter Road, and we probably should have won. Like, we're just glad that we got the 2-1 win and got out of there. And same as last night as well. We didn't play well. I took my mate to the game. He hadn't been to a game since Izagiri was the left back. So
first or second time round?
I think it was second time, but I think I felt slightly bad that I wasn't taking him to a footballing masterclass. But ultimately, he also, by the way, commented on how poor the referee was, and he's a Celtic fan, but not. I mean, given how long it's been since he's been at a game, he works offshore. He doesn't have the same opportunities to go to the games as most people. So he couldn't believe how bad the referee was. I mean, he watches a lot of football, and he was just like, this guy. It was almost kind of like sitting with somebody who had neutral glasses on. It was just like observing it from a standpoint of, well, what's going on here. But delighted to get the win, and really, really happy that as many people stayed around till the end. I know it was a Wednesday night, freezing night in December and everything else, but there was definitely more people there at the end than maybe normally there would be. And Martin O'Neill thoroughly, and the coaching staff thoroughly, deserved the reception that they got. And like I said, that video in the dressing room, I'll save that for after.
Well, JP, I asked you the question, how can this game of football do that to us? It's Celtic that does it to us, that emotional release. And I have mentioned on here before, I mean, I'm going to mention a few things that happened last night because, as you will know, we had a live event with Scott Brown. No one in their right mind would choose to go toe-to-toe with a Celtic fixture, particularly when we've just announced a new manager, particularly when it's going to be Martin O'Neill's final game. That would never be part of the plan. But as you'll know, with regards to event planning, these things are a long time in the making. We were in the process of having booked venues and made offers, etc., and then the fixture came out. So although we announced it either before or after, I'm not sure, that gig was going to go ahead. Thankfully, it was sold out, and let's just say everybody enjoyed themselves. But I was asking Scott Brown, I was bending his ear a wee bit about certain things that you can have a take on it, JP, but you then ask someone within the game and they'll give you a completely different perspective on it. And you're learning all the time when you speak to these people. So I'll be tapping in and out of Scott Brown's take on a number of these different things. But in relation to that video, I'll say this again. I can only go back to growing up and seeing my old fella and my uncles and my cousins and my mum's cousins all coming together for this. It was like a weekly, honestly, it was something that no matter what happened during the week, JP, they came together to go and watch Celtic. And they would travel, because we're in Fife, in any mode of transport. I'm talking wee paint vans and all this kind of stuff, where there's maybe two in the front, the rest of them are sitting in the back with a carry-out. They would get to Celtic Park and all their away games as well. And I've said on here before, they all followed Scotland as well. I'm not sure they've seen much of the football when they followed Scotland, but they did all that stuff. And these were like, just working class guys. My dad worked in the pit. My Uncle Chick is a painter. It was his van, generally speaking, that they would travel in. And during the week, JP, these guys wouldn't kiss and cuddle and hug and sing together and cry. They just wouldn't. But Celtic made them do that. And this is the big thing. It's like tapping into something within your psyche that nothing else. Listen, I think music does it. I think you have the same kind of emotional attachment and experiences. Maybe it's a community aspect. Maybe it's being in a room full of people all there for a common goal. I don't know. I can't really explain it, but I see it. And you've touched on it today because I watched that video this morning going, what's wrong with me, man? Get over this, man. Because I'm preparing, obviously, for today's show. But it's very emotional. And that's a big part of that's Martin O'Neill. This is what it's brought to us.
I think it's because he ties together there's a link to the past there that will go with him and with others like him and with us as well. When we're gone, nobody will remember living through the 90s and things like that. That'll be a kind of things that you read about or watch old grainy videos on YouTube about. But I saw a picture that I think I'd seen before, but hadn't been for a very, very long time. So it's not one that, maybe it is one that's widely shared and I just missed, but it's the one of Jock Stein with his arm around Martin O'Neill on the park.
I'd seen that recently, mate. Yes, I did see that.
It must have been an international fixture, and it's just incredible. I think it's just a still from a video that someone snapped. It's not an actual proper high quality picture, but I think that's what I was thinking about when I was seeing him putting his arm around the players, and he just said, "Oh, Scalesy," and I was like, "Right, I'm switching it off."
He started off talking about Sweden and ABBA and Bjorn Borg, didn't he? And he was going, "You're my fourth favourite Swede." Was he talking? I'm guessing to Nygren. Is that right?
Oh no, I didn't get that far. Or maybe I've just seen maybe it started playing. I saw Maeda, and then I saw him put his arm around Maeda, and then he tapped his head, and you could obviously see he was wanting to express something, but he's like, well, I don't really have much Japanese in my locker, probably. So, and then he went on to Scalesy, and I was like, right, that's it off. But yeah, like I said, it's just like that link to the past. I think I'd forgotten that he'd actually met Jock Stein, albeit briefly. I don't know if he met him outside of that moment on the pitch, or whatever. But it's almost like you think of like the New Order song, "Touched by the Hand of God," and you're just like.
Mm-hmm.
He was.
I'm thinking about a T-shirt that needs to be on a T-shirt somewhere.
Martin, I have to say, I'll be looking for unofficial merchandise involving Martin O'Neill and Jock Stein, because if Celtic are, well, let's face it, we know they're smart when it comes to merchandise. I would be very, very surprised if there wasn't at least a T-shirt of a modern day Martin O'Neill image, or a collection of Martin O'Neill images on sale in the Celtic store. But much to their despair, they'll not be getting a penny from me until things change, because I fully support this campaign. And again, first home game in however long, didn't go anywhere near the kiosks. I've got no desire to spend any money until when? There's a guy that who sits next to me who's I can't remember if it was his brother or his uncle, but hasn't spent a penny in Celtic Park since 2019. Bought a season ticket, goes to the games, but hasn't spent a penny on merch or kiosks since 2019. And I think it was after the Cluj game that was his breaking point, where he was just like, "Nah, I'm not having this." The Cluj qualifiers.
Yeah, we mentioned that last week, didn't we? And I did touch on that as being one of the 7 from 9, as it's unaffectionately known, where we failed to get through the Champions League qualifiers, and you can look at it and say, well, we never prepared. And on that particular occasion, Callum McGregor's playing left back that night. And we had spent £10 million, but the guys that we had spent the money on hadn't been brought in on time. They were sitting on the bench. It's Chris Julian and Bolingoli. And we showed later on that season that had we brought them in and we were planning properly, we would have beaten them, because we've been
to be fair, Bolingoli could have stayed on the bench for my liking, but that's
he proved himself down the line to absolutely be a bad signing. You're right, but again, we failed. We failed to prepare for a Champions League qualifier, and we will be touching on that. It's a massive discussion point, obviously, with regards to where we are in relation to that. And what you can do, because you said until whenever. That's I think one of the most important points, JP. There is no end in sight. There needs to be a coming together of minds. There has to be a compromise. We will be talking about that. We'll be celebrating Martin O'Neill, just celebrate him, and we'll be talking about the new era of Wilfried Nancy coming in. That picture you're talking about, it is a frame from a Scotland-Ireland international game. I spoke to Martin O'Neill on the occasions that we were live, and we will be announcing one very, very shortly. I wanted to announce it yesterday, but obviously for obvious reasons we weren't allowed, but now he's no longer a Celtic manager. That will be happening very soon. Definitely. 100%. 100%. We'll be getting Martin O'Neill in front of an audience.
Nebworth,
I think the Hydro. So the book behind you, in preparation for the first time I spoke to him, if there's a book, I'll read it. And I read that, and he speaks about when he was playing for Distillery. Mm-hmm. Now, that was the same team that we got Anton Rogan and Alan McKnight from, Distillery. And he tells a story, that it was well named because the players were always half jaked when they were playing and all this kind of stuff. I don't know if I would need to look into the history of Distillery as a football club, but I'm thinking it was one of the works teams, I think. Like PSV Eindhoven was the Phillips work team, wasn't it? And there's lots of works teams by Leverkusen. So Martin O'Neill talks about the fact that Celtic sent over a scout. He was getting a lot of attention as a young player at Distillery. They won the cup, and which obviously allowed them to play in Europe, and they drew Barcelona. And a young Martin O'Neill scored against Barcelona. So there was a lot of interest in him as a young player. And Celtic sent a scout over, and he said he was murder. I mean, this is coming from Martin O'Neill. He says, I was terrible in the game, and they never came back to see me. At the time, Jock Stein was the manager of Celtic. And of course, he goes to Nottingham Forest, and everybody knows the career that he had. But I'm guessing it's that game, unless they came together at a different point. But in an international game, Martin O'Neill speaks to Jock Stein after the game, and he says that, I could have played for you. You sent a scout over. And he says Jock Stein was very polite about it, but there was no way he remembered Martin O'Neill or the fact that he'd sent a scout over. But yes, he could have signed for Celtic. He could have signed for Celtic under Jock Stein. And if there was any doubt in anybody's mind, JP, in terms of a rank, Martin O'Neill was second only to that man as a Celtic manager. I'm not just saying this being over emotional. Let's really put it down here. He's the only man outside of Jock Stein to take us to a European final. He came in at a time where we've spoken about the psychology of Celtic supporters and change, etc. He came in at a time where Rangers were still dominating. I know we'd stopped to 10. Rangers were still dominating Scottish football at the point that Martin O'Neill comes to the football club. and he changed everything. Modern Celtic, a massive part of that's down to Mark O'Neill. No doubt about it.
100,000,000%. I mean, it's not just being said for the sake of it. I mean, who else are you going to argue, really? I mean, there's no way that in terms of those 5 years, I mean, even the fact that he was there for 5 years as a manager, that's a lengthy enough time to make such a huge imprint on the club as a whole, and then to come back and do what he's done in the last 5-6 weeks is, I mean, the chat about the thing that he put into an interview about I've got a coffee still sitting waiting on me in the King's Road in London. I was just like, that's brilliant. Like that's up there with, you know, some of the best quotes I've ever heard associated with Celtic. You know, that he's just like, there was that coffee sitting there, gets the phone call, suddenly the coffee's not the most important thing in his world. It's getting on a flight to Glasgow, probably not a flight. I think he must have got a train because he didn't have his passport, did he? Oh no, you can fly internally without a passport, but yeah, he's just making his way up to Celtic. And just on that as well, I don't know, there's an interview kicking about with Mark Fotheringham that a friend sent to me last night that's really good, where he's talks in depth about how he got the call. And
is it the written interview? Yeah. I think it was Callum McFadden that wrote that.
That's right. Yeah.
Aye, brilliant.
Yeah.
Go check it out.
Really good interview. So you just kind of hear about all these different phone calls that are being made at that time to be like, right, this has happened. We need to get people in to steady this ship. And Martin O'Neill was at the helm of it for the last 6 weeks. And I think as much as I heard you say yesterday or the day before that you'd heard that you'd got the bug for it and maybe didn't want to give it up too easily, but I think that for the long-term benefit of the club, it did make. And as much as it's mental that we've got the game against Hearts on Sunday, and that's Wilfried Nancy's first game in charge is going to be that game, it's quite remarkable. But I think there had to be a moment at some point where you go, right, this is great and everything, but we've got to think about the longer term and planning for the rest of the season, planning for next season and how crucial the January window is for next season. Because he's not, if he did stay to the end of the season, then that's the end of the season. We've still got qualifiers next season. So everything about January is so important for next season. So that's why I would side on the argument of bringing in a new coach just now rather than waiting any longer or waiting until after the cup final. I think if you're waiting until after the cup final, then you really are involving probably too much sentiment. I was just relieved that we got the chance to do that last night at home, and that the farewell was at home rather than away, because, well, it was well documented my ire at the fact that we couldn't get tickets for Easter Road, and that's a whole discussion point in itself. And I was really, really frustrated that I couldn't go on Sunday because of the fact that there was no tickets. You couldn't get a ticket for love nor money, but yet there was hundreds of empty seats in the stand that we were sitting in. Make it make sense to me. Had so many people in the replies, oh, well, maybe if you behave yourself, you'll get more tickets. And I'm like, I'm sorry, right, but there's 1,000 fans there. Why are you letting those 1,000 fans come in and then be like, but if there was 500 more or 1,000 more, then that increases the chance of trouble? I'm sorry, but if we were that bad, then just don't give us any tickets at all. Just leave the stand empty, fill your boots, or rather the opposite of that. You're not going to get any money from us. So, if we're that bad. And then the other argument was, what else? Oh, you don't give us tickets, and then you've got this pillar and everything else. And I'm like, right, well, yeah, the pillar is the same at the other side for the Celtic home support. So it's an unfortunate flaw in the makeup of the stadium. What do you want us to do? Saw it down and then just hope for the best? Like, I knew what I was doing.
We'll need to work that into the CGI. We'll need to work in. So what we're doing with that pillar, does it become a hologram? I don't know.
I knew what I was doing when I posted it. I was very well aware that I was going to be picking up, some of the replies were.
I was going to ask you about it though, JP, because you know a few Hibbies, right? Like proper Hibs fans, because you've mentioned them to me in the past.
Yeah.
I have mentioned you at some point this week in relation to this discussion point about the lack of tickets. And online, whenever the discussion comes up, all you see is us getting called entitled, etc., etc. And from a business perspective, I still can't get my head around the decision. Now, I haven't seen Celtic fans go into away grounds and rioting and wrecking the place and all this kind of stuff, JP. I've not seen it. If someone can show me that and that being a reason why they don't want Celtic supporters in their stadium, I've yet to see it. All I look upon is the business aspect, because all we hear is financial advantage. That's all we ever get as Celtic fans. Like at some point we were given more than everybody else. No, Celtic have earned every single penny that we have at our disposal. We've sold every single season ticket to our fan base. We've built that fan base over almost 140 years of history. Now, we're not the oldest football club in Scotland, far from it. Everybody's had an opportunity at this. Everybody's had a run at this, JP, to build something, right? And build a fan base and build a business, alongside that. So we've not been given a cheat code. We've done it the hard way. I always call 1994 ground zero. Yeah, you had a worldwide fan base. You had that. But in terms of a financial, going concern business, that was day one when Fergus McCann takes over. And, the fan base is a huge advantage. Of course it is, JP. But these other teams constantly moan about an advantage or a disadvantage when it comes to Celtic. Yet you're turning away vast sums of money, huge amounts of money that you could put back into your...
Oh, hold on. Apparently it's not that much. Like, 50 grand. Oh, that's not that much. And you're like, right, well, 50 grand would probably cover a significant chunk, if not all, of your wage bill for next week. Are you trying
times it by 4 times a season, JP, and the money spent within the stadium, and it's probably closer to 400 to 500 grand a season that they're turning away, not just from Celtic, but also from Rangers. I don't see the business sense. Don't come and moan at me that there's a disadvantage financially when you're turning away the money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I get... Obviously, there was many replies. Some of them were highly offensive. I'm not going to read them out. And I did my best to... I think somebody replied something about, a derogatory name for our stadium, which, sure you could probably figure out what that is. And another derogatory name aimed at me. And I just went back to the guy and went, "You're letting your club and yourself down with a tweet like that." Like that's a Hibs fan, apparently. But it was coming away with rhetoric that you would expect from them, But a guy replied and said, "I'm Hibernian through and through. From a business perspective, I cannot understand why the whole stand wasn't given to Celtic. Atmosphere was PISH today. Thousands of pounds lost in revenue. I personally don't get it." And then I referred that tweet to somebody else who was arguing and like, "Oh, that guy's not a real Hibs fan." And I was like, well... Looking through his Twitter, he's been on Twitter since 2011, and I'm sorry, but that's quite a committed front to
burner. That's a committed burner account. Yeah,
14 years of masquerading as a Hibs fan for whatever reason. But he's also followed by Cliff Pike, who's an old friend of mine who is a commentator on Hibs TV. Famously, was the commentator on one of the obviously streams of the Scottish Cup final in 2016, which. I will never tire of hearing Cliff's dulcet tones commentate on those goals in that final, particularly the winner. Good guy. He follows him. And Long Bangers podcast, my mate Matty Fairney does a Hibs podcast, and I listened to their podcast on Sunday night to hear what they had to say for it. And I was pretty certain that they were going to bring it up at some point, because how could they not? It was a fairly big topic of conversation. And Matty started out by kind of saying, "Oh, well, the Celtic fans have done this to themselves because of their behaviour, and they've got to remember that. That's why the allocation was reduced." But he kind of ended up talking himself round by the end of it. He was like, if it's like, take your Hibs hat off, you're playing devil's advocate. Say we go to Motherwell and we want 1,000 tickets and they only give us 300, but yet there's 700 empty seats sitting around about us. How would you feel? And the other two guys in the podcast were kind of like, I suppose it's a bit of both, eh? That's an Edinburgh / Kev Graham accent, but
straight out of Train Spotting. Like that.
but that is kind of what they said. They couldn't vehemently say that it was a bad move. The idea, like, obviously there's again a lot of people defending Hibs for looking after their own, and the fact that there was a smattering of fans in the bottom right corner of that stand, the south stand. They were given priority. And then there was another guy saying with like dewy-eyed mysticism that just say a father and his son had taken a kid to the game that day, and then they've then decided to get season tickets because of that experience. And I'm like, that's really, really nice to think like that. But what about all the money that you've lost?
Mm-hmm.
If you had, and if Celtic had it as well, by the way, because we could have employed it last night. There was empty seats last night in the home end before anybody starts throwing
I've seen that. I've seen that. People looking, like, scouring online for an image of a less than full Celtic Park, JP, almost as if to say this is the same thing.
It's not.
Even though, you've sold the seat. I don't know if you're going to mention ticket exchange. You've sold the seat.
I am.
And we don't even have the software in place to swap it.
There was plenty of seats dotted around Easter Road. Plenty to have accommodated those people that were in that stand. Mm-hmm. If you had a ticket exchange system in place, membership scheme, whatever, those guys and girls that got those tickets in that stand, if they really wanted to go to that game and they couldn't get a ticket around the rest of the ground because it was sold out, all those seats could have been resold. You rehouse those people, sell the full stand to Celtic supporters because there's a demand there and there's not the demand from your own support, and you've got a full house for the game. And like the guy said, atmosphere was whatever, televised game. How bad does that look? I could see, I was sitting waiting for the camera to get, and I knew the exact angle that I needed to get a picture of that stand with those seats, because as soon as the camera was down on the touchline, that's the one angle, because every other camera angle, you only got the bottom half of the stand. So you didn't get that upper part of the stand. So, I don't know if Sky were deliberately avoiding showing it so that it didn't look as bad. But it was there. It was, and then there's a video as well from someone in the Celtic end or from up the stairs videoing the whole ground. And just like when you see the camera spin right, and you're like, this is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. And
what other industry in the world, JP? You work in an industry which has gone through difficult times, like a lot during COVID. What other industry in the world would turn away people with money in their hand looking to buy tickets?
Wild. And I also have to mention this as well. A guy also slagging me, going, haha, tagging Hibs, haha, because I was like, hello at Hibernian Football Club, right? And then I just found my Alan Burrows tweet and then replied to it and went, oh yeah, tagging the CEO, and he replies. That happened. I ended up having like a rational conversation with the then CEO of Motherwell about this exact situation.
Yep.
Post-COVID, everyone's desperate to go to football matches in real life rather than sitting and watching them at home. And Motherwell, he came back. At least he came back with some sort of rational.
They had an answer.
Mm-hmm.
They gave you their side of the argument.
Yeah.
And they took the time to do that. The Motherwell CEO has communicated more with you than the Celtic CEO, JP. That's phenomenal work. Phenomenal.
By the way, he has. He has. Like,
I know. It's incredible. Eh?
Yeah. Incredible. Anyway, let's move past that, because I'm sure people are bored of it. But yeah, it's still a bone of contention. And I was relieved when I heard on Sunday that Martin O'Neill was going to be taking charge last night, because, call me sentimental or not, I wanted that moment. I wanted that moment last night, and I felt like I was being denied it on Sunday. So I'm really, really glad we got it, and I'm really, really glad we got the victory. Just like I'm really glad we got the victory last Thursday, because you asked me at the end of the show last Thursday, go and give us a wee prediction, JP, and that is the moment where you realise that there's potentially thousands of people, or a couple of thousand people watching.
Yeah.
And you're on the spot, you could get clipped up, you could get mocked and everything else. And I have been in the past, and it's not pleasant when you get sent that and you're like, oh, right, okay, that's nice. But I said that I thought we were going to win last week. I don't know why. The fact that we won 3-1, the exact same scoreline as Ajax Amsterdam away in 2001, Martin O'Neill's last victory there. The third goal being in off the bar as well, like Sutton's header. It was just like, this is weird. This is eerie.
Written in the stars.
Aye, it was amazing, and I know how much that will have meant to Martin O'Neill because of the lack of away wins that he really got in Europe. It was obviously the UEFA Cup run. We obviously got our fair share of them in terms of like Blackburn and Liverpool and whatnot. But doing that as an interim manager at 73 years old and getting an away victory against Feyenoord are not flying high at the moment. But to go a goal down, when we went a goal down, I was like, oh no, here we go.
You felt like it was the same old story at that point.
Yeah, and we hadn't won away in Europe for 4 years,
Yeah.
and yet we're getting told that we are like this, we're doing well and everything else. I'm sorry, but not winning an away game in Europe for 4 years, and I know the bulk of those games have been in the Champions League, but even still, I mean, that's not good enough. That is absolutely not good enough.
You'll probably get a better explanation from the Motherwell CEO than you would from our own JP when you take them to task over that. I do want to celebrate the brilliance of Martin O'Neill today, but also look ahead. I mean, I said yesterday, JP, in relation to the run of games that are coming up, there's no perfect time actually to bring in a new manager. It's just one of the ones where you're always going to have these demands. Yes, you're playing the top of the league via goal difference team. We're on the same amount of points. You win that game, you go top. You go 3 clear. Yeah, and then after that, you're playing Roma. And then after that's a League Cup final. I mean, wow, what an introduction. What a baptism of fire. And I don't know. I think it's a measure of the man. I'm sure this has been discussed with Wilfried Nancy. I think it's a measure of the man that he's like, yeah, bring it on. That's fine. That's my first 3 games. Let's do this. And I think that's a huge sign of his character. As I said earlier on, I'm going to mention a few things Scott Brown said last night because I think it's important to give a perspective of someone on the inside of the game, because we can have our opinions and stuff like that, JP, but then sometimes they're like, well, actually, this is my take on it. So I'm going to be doing a wee bit of that. So Martin O'Neill, and I'm also going to bring in some of the brilliant comments from the 1,888 people watching the show. 290th game in charge last night. 290th game in charge of Celtic last night. And in his second tenure, he wins 7 from 8. 87.5% win rate in his second tenure at Celtic. Unbelievable. He's just 25 games now short of 1,000 games managed. But I don't think he'll manage another game. I think he'll bow out. He says a thing. I'm not going to ruin it for you. He says a thing about how he's feeling right now in that video that you're going to go back and watch. We're level with Hearts, obviously, and we've got a game in hand. League Cup final, back into the Europa League. I think we're back in to believing that we could get a Europa League playoff space. Where a lot of us had kind of written it off. People in the comment section were saying, you know what, don't risk it. It's all about the league, etc. We're back in with a chance. And when you consider the state of the team, because we were in a bit of a state when Brendan Rodgers leaves, and then you compare that to where we are right now, he has paved the way for a new manager to come in. He has made that transition so much more comfortable, JP, than it would have been if he just comes in to replace Brendan Rodgers. And the new manager should be really thankful for that as well.
As should we.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like to come in at that time was, I mean, you just didn't know how it was going to go. You didn't know what the feeling was inside. You didn't know. I still don't know who out of that Celtic team were disappointed that Brendan Rodgers left. You know, Nygren's spoken about how he was one of the reasons that he came to the club. So, and a good few of them have got relationships. I'm sure Callum McGregor was a bit rocked by the news. Schmeichel as well. Iheanacho, who he'd only recently brought to the club. Kieran Tierney, he's got a relationship with Kieran Tierney. That's a decent amount of players already. Maybe, I don't know, the likes of Yang or Hatate or whatever, I don't know if they've picked up in form because of a new manager or a change in voice, but you didn't know how it was going to go. And like you said, Wilfried Nancy coming in at that time, put it this way, there would have been a lot more guns trained on him at that point than there is right now. It almost feels, despite the fact that we've got a difficult run, it feels like a bit more of a comfortable introduction rather than an uncomfortable introduction. You know, it's all, and we've had so long to basically digest that it's going to be him. Everybody's kind of known that it's going to be him to take over for how long? I mean, it's seemingly been like 3 or 4 weeks that this news has just been percolating. So it was no surprise at all when you it was more of a surprise that you find out on the way to the game, really, it was being announced. I thought they might have waited till today. Surely they must have debated that long and hard over, do we do it on the night? Do we do it at half time? Do we do it at full time? Do we do it the next morning?
Things have been pretty sporadic recently, though, haven't they? I don't know if it's been well thought out, JP.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I don't know. I really don't know. Just with the Monday night statement that we've spoken about already, and you're just thinking, really? Is that necessary? And the various other statements that have been flying about. And yeah, it did seem unusual. But I mean, I think they just wanted to stop the speculation around Martin O'Neill. Maybe Martin O'Neill said, look, is it not about time that you just confirmed this?
I've basically told TalkSport, I've told Jim White on TalkSport that it's going to be Wilfried Nancy. Like, you've not said anything, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right. I thought you were talking about yourself. I was like, were you on this morning, JP?
No. But a few of the Celtic sites were like, yeah, that's the new manager confirmed by our current interim manager on TalkSport. Like, all right, okay. It's a bit slapdash, but regardless, it's happened, and I've done a bit of looking into the guy, and I have to say I'm excited about the prospect of what he could do at Celtic. And he mentioned, I saw the little interview with him where he mentioned having spoken to Victor Wanyama and Alistair Johnston about Celtic. So it's kind of good that he has that, knowledge already. And Martin O'Neill's advice to him, he said, I would never be so bold as to give him advice. He said, my opinion, I think that's what he was sort of hammering home, would be to look up the history of the club, to know the history of Celtic. So Nancy strikes me as the type of guy that would do just that, with or without Martin O'Neill's kind of prompt. I think he would have done that anyway. I think the moment that he got the call from Paul Tisdale, whoever, he would have been like, right, if this is happening, I want to know what I'm walking into. Like, I'm not walking into the present. I'm walking into the past, the present, and the future of Celtic, and that's what we would hope. Somebody coming in, because then you're coming in with your eyes open. You know what we are protesting about. You know what the gripe is. Because if again, like you said, and you spoke to people down at the Football Content Awards, what he's moaning for. He's have won all these trophies. like the outside looking in, he could look at that naively and go, oh well, you've won the last how many league titles, and you've only lost one league title since 2011, 2012. I could understand someone coming from outside this bubble and thinking that's weird, but I would imagine he'll have looked into that and been like, well, Champions League's not been too great in terms of qualifications. Like, I'm sure he would understand that. I'm sure as someone who wants to progress, he's wanting to progress his own career by coming to Celtic, leaving the MLS behind, leaving, a lot of credibility and stature in that league, because he won Coach of the Year, he's won a trophy.
He is the rising star, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So he could sit comfortable and sort of play the same game as the Celtic board are, in terms of like, oh well, as long as we win the league, and as long as we beat Rangers. But he's progressed his own career, so he's coming to a club where the support are craving progression beyond just doing what we've done, And like you said, there's no reason why we can't do both. Why should we have to sacrifice success or attempting success in domestic front to also succeed in Europe, and to give ourselves a fighting chance, and to not wait 4 years for an away victory in Europe? So when it arrives, it's like some sort of, all your Christmases come at once. Like you said last week, we owe the away support so much, because those folk that were in Rotterdam last week have been at all those losses and all those draws, and there's more losses than draws. So when I saw when the camera cut to the Celtic away support last Thursday, obviously a bit gutted I wasn't there, but having been in the stadium 2 years ago for the defeat, I was so happy for the people that would all have been at that defeat and that were all there on Thursday, So, and it really, you could tell how much it meant, and how much it meant to the manager as well, and the players, because the way they celebrated Negrin's goal was like, it was great. It was
unity.
Really, it was really good to see that.
Yeah, it was. And I do want to look ahead to Nancy, because obviously with regards to a new Celtic manager, I have been speaking about could have maybe just stay for a wee bit longer. And one of the things last night I spoke to Scott Brown about backstage was about Martin O'Neill staying at Celtic in some capacity. By the way, that book over your shoulder is going to need a revised edition with an extra chapter. He wrote another chapter in his book. That's exactly what he has done.
He did, yeah.
And I says to Scott Brown, I was like, there was a tiny wee screen backstage. We were watching the game during the break, and I said, I just think he should stay. He's brought such a unity to the football club. Incredible. He's been working as a shield almost in some way of the board. And Bruni said, he goes, you know what? He's just such a presence. It might actually be overbearing on the new manager if Martin O'Neill was still there, almost like, the guys marking your homework. And I probably hadn't thought about it like that.
In the same way that Sir Alex Ferguson has kind of been overbearing at Manchester United for every single manager that's followed him.
Totally.
It must be so difficult when you're trying to plough your own path and you look up and you're like, oh,
cast a shadow. That's
we're getting beat 2-0 at home off Crystal Palace and Sir Alex Ferguson's watching over you. It's like extra pressure. I was obviously thinking a little bit in the same way, but every time I heard you mention it or someone else mention it, I kind of, no disrespect, but I kind of moved further away from that idea as for that exact reason. He's come in and he's done so well in this point, and it's just like, you don't want to just a made up role or some sort of, technical director or something like that. He's done what he's done, and I'm sure he's happy to go back to that coffee on the King's Road, having done what he's done. He doesn't need to have a Celtic suit in his wardrobe to put on every now and then to come and do a job at Celtic. I think he's earned the right to walk away, like he said. I'll walk away into the sunset.
Yeah.
And what an amazing way to do it, like proper amazing way to do it. So yeah, I think the idea of him staying on, whilst as misty-eyed, it's the same misty-eyed probably thinking process behind that Hibs supporter that was thinking, oh well, maybe that father and his son that got the tickets together that day would buy season tickets, and you're just like, well, right, but you've just lost thousands and thousands of pounds. So I don't think that's maybe the right move. I think it's great that he's done what he's done, but we've, like I said earlier, we've got planning to do, and there's so much about this season impacts next season, and I just think, I mean, it would be a short-term role anyway. Let's face it, he's not going to be given like a 5-year contract or anything like that. It would have been like a short-term thing, but I think he should definitely be given a seat for life at Celtic Park. I mean, he's probably got one anyway, but much the same way that Billy Connolly has one and Rod Stewart has one, there should be a Martin O'Neill seat there for, whenever he wants it.
I agree. I seen Roderick at the final game. I think everybody did. But in relation to that, the one example I was going to use, you've used a better one with Alex Ferguson actually, but I read a book, I can't even remember, was it called Talking Shankly? It was about Bill Shankly. And when he stopped managing Liverpool, apparently he continued to come to his work. Right, It was bizarre. Maybe a Liverpool fan will fill us in more detail. So he could not accept that his time as manager was over. JP, he did not have a position at the football club, but he continued to come to training. Continued to come to training and sit up in the terrace and or in the stand, and it was that effect to the point where someone actually had to go and tell him, "You can't do this. You can't keep doing that. You're putting the manager off." And apparently, and as I say, a Liverpool fan might put me right on this, he thought, oh, really? But he had such a thirst and an appetite for football, he went to Goodison. Just went to Goodison and helped out with the training over there. So I think it is. I think you're right. The psychology of it might actually affect the new guy coming in. And I've been looking at, obviously, Wilfried Nancy for weeks, like everybody else. And I think everybody knows what he's achieved in the MLS. 2.5-year deal, raised a few eyebrows last night. And I've been looking at the backroom team as well. So we've got, let me try my best with some of the pronunciations. So we've got Jules Gugen, who's a fitness coach. We've got Maxime Chalier, video performance coach. And we've got Kwame Ampadu. Now, I remembered that name. Now, he's a guy who starts his football career at Arsenal. And he was a teammate, believe it or not, of Martin Hayes. There you go. I just wanted to throw that in. So that's not how I remembered them, but I remembered them from being a player at Arsenal. He was a midfielder who also went to West Bromwich Albion, Swansea, Exeter City, which is a team that keeps popping up, and others. And you know, there's a wee while, I think Josh McCafferty said there was a link there between Paul Tisdale and the assistant manager. Well, the link isn't just the fact that his boy played with Exeter, but he was also the under-18s boss at the same time as Tisdale was first-team manager. So they know each other, clearly. He moved on to Arsenal youth and under-18 coached. When he was working with Nancy at Montreal, he also worked with Alistair Johnson, as you mentioned, Victor Wanyama. Spent some time at Monaco working under Thierry Henry. He brought up in Dublin and he won an under-21 honour with the Republic as well. He's got an Irish mother. His son obviously is doing very well. I think he's got about 50 caps for Wales now, plays with Leeds. But when I'm looking at that as well, the big thing I'm taking from it, JP, is this is a manager bringing his own backroom team. And that's something that, I think gradually Rodgers brought in 2 or 3 bodies. I get that. But this is like a new team, all coming in at the same time. And that is a wee bit different from what we've seen. I mean, let's go back to even Neil Lennon. So Neil Lennon inherits his backroom team, doesn't he, second time round. Brendan Rodgers, to a degree, inherited people like John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan. And I think Ange Postecoglou was quite happy to inherit a team. If you listen to it, he likes to change it, doesn't he? And he did bring a few in himself. But I think this is a big change. Not just the fact that Nancy's coming in, but 4 of the management team, including himself, are coming in.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a bit more cohesive and tied together. The fact that there is a direct link between Tisdale, who is the head of football operations, and the manager and his assistant. I don't know how much there is a relationship between Wilfried Nancy and Paul Tisdale, but obviously, if you're bringing in the guy's right-hand man, then there's a link there. Yeah. And it's not Dermot Desmond picking up the phone, put it that way. It might have come with Dermot Desmond's approval. Of course it does. Everything does, obviously. But like, I've always been wary of people being foisted upon new managers that they don't necessarily want to have. Whereas this has been a case of like, well, who do you if you want to bring these guys, maybe much the same way as we would have done with Eddie Howe if he could have got all his management, if he could have got all his coaching staff together and to agree to go, because basically you're basically turning around and saying, we're going to Glasgow, by the way. Well, what, really? We're leaving like Ohio and America to go to Glasgow. It's quite a big change to ask people with families and everything else. Like if someone came to you and just said, oh yeah, we're going to, Kazakhstan, are you cool with that? Just take the wee guy out of school and,
This is it. This is the consideration. Absolutely.
So all of that, the fact that they've all agreed to do it is great, because obviously it means that they're passionate about the project, that they're willing to, up sticks and move to Glasgow to come and do this job here with the coach. And you asked me last week, and you made reference to the fact that I studied French at uni, and my mum was a French teacher, obsessed with France and everything else. The sheer fact that when you pronounce the city Nantes, is you don't say Nantes, you say Nantes. So Wilfried Nancy, that's the best example I could give. If anybody's been like, oh, what are you calling him Nancy for? He's no, that's that. Why are we calling him like it's Nancy? Like people can call him whatever they want, but like that is, if you're talking about pronunciation. And
the thing is, every time you mention Nantes, I just think of one player, and I'm not even going to mention him. Right, and they had brilliant kits back then as well. The Adidas kits, phenomenal.
Well, he who shall not be named.
He ruined that image of that beautiful Nantes kit. Absolutely. And by the way, that's a great way of remembering it, and we'll continue to call him with the correct pronunciation. In relation to the baptism of fire, I've said this week, JP, and I'm going to stick with it. If you come to Celtic, every game's a must win. So, these 3, absolutely, you've got a tabletop and clash, you've got a European game and a cup final. It doesn't matter. You could have been playing Dundee last night. You've got to win the game. So, there's no perfect time, is there?
No, absolutely not. And like everybody always says, every game is a big game for Celtic. Like last night, we had a wrong to right in terms of the fact that they'd beaten us, a month and a half ago, or whatever. I mean, that was a really, really grim day. So it would have been nice to put a bit of sparkle in the scoreline, really, and I actually looked back to see what the last scoreline was when Martin O'Neill played Dundee at home in 2005. Do you know what it was? You wouldn't. There's no way you would know off the top of your head. Neither would I if somebody asked me.
Wait a minute. No, I'm going to. Obviously, I will answer your question though. Let me think. And I'm not googling. I'm not checking. My hands are here. Right. So you're asking for the score.
The last time at home to Dundee, somewhere around March, April 2005.
One each.
No, a centre half scored twice for Celtic.
5-0.
3-0. Bobo Baldi scored twice for Celtic.
Oh, Scott Brown was talking about him last night.
Oh, right. But see, for anybody who probably maybe thinks wrongly that you know Scott Brown, last night was the first time you met Scott Brown, right?
This is it. I literally, obviously Scott doesn't live in Fife now, but where he lives, Hillabeath, or where he was brought up, rather, it's a small mining village in Fife, and I literally live maybe 7 or 8 minutes away from there. Mm-hmm. Never paths never crossed ever. I'm a wee bit older than him, so certainly not in the football sense. But no, I never met him, never spoken to him. And last night, I've got to say, it took a long time for us to get Scott Brown on a stage, and it was an absolute privilege because you know what? He's very humble, JP, very humble. And I don't think he was playing a part. He was genuinely humble because a few times I had to say to him, the only person that's ever captained Celtic to 9 in a row is Billy McNeil, and you. You know, you won a quadruple treble, and somebody at halftime came up to me and said, and it's a great point, because you get so to the point, JP, where you're preparing for the night and you've got all your questions and all that, you barely look at the questions, to be fair. You let the thing, but they're there. It's almost like a comfort thing. I hadn't considered this, and he said to me, Celtic fans haven't really been given an opportunity to say farewell. So
that's one of my biggest. I mean, you talk about, you can call me emotional if you want, but that picture of him that he posted in the middle of an empty Celtic Park at the end of his time at Celtic was one of the saddest things I've ever seen in my time as a Celtic supporter, because nobody deserved a bigger send-off than Scott Brown for everything that he went through as a player, as a person at Celtic.
Yeah,
nobody does it, and the fact that happened was a real cruel twist of fate, I think.
No, without a doubt. And the room, it was sold out last night. The room were on their feet. They were all giving it to Bruni. They raised the roof for him, and he's very humble indeed. And it was quite funny because obviously he said, "I can't believe I'm sitting next to another Fifer. He's got all his teeth, and he's even written things down, and he takes my book off me." So he was winding me up for the start. It's going to be a good night. But no, absolutely. He mentioned Bobo Bal. He mentioned all the managers he had played under at Celtic and his relationship with each individual manager, which was a really interesting insight. I'm not going to ruin it for anybody that goes to see Bruni, but he did speak about the fact that, here's one for you. I will say this. So Brendan Rodgers, when we mentioning him, that this is the thing, this is the fast-moving modern football. Scott Brown said, Brendan Rodgers is the reason I got another 6 years at Celtic. Brendan Rodgers is the reason I got my last 6 years at Celtic. That's what he said. And he explained how when he came in, he said, right, I want to meet you. I think we know about this.
In London.
Down in London. I want to meet you, and this is my plan. And Bruni, even Scott said, he was maybe thinking, I'm winding down. He goes, right, you do this. And he told him, you live your life like this, and you train for me like this, and you will be at the top of your game for another 5 or 6 years. And he was right. And he was so invested in the man management aspect to the team at that point. Rates them very, very highly, still speaks to him. He says there's 3 managers who he still speaks to regularly, obviously within his own fledgling managerial career, and it's Gordon Strachan, Neil Lennon, who he's got there, and Brendan Rodgers. So that's the 3 managers. Even though he had a good time, I think, with the likes of Tony Mowbray at Hibs, they were the 3 managers that he mentioned. And I had a lot of funny tales and all that as well. Tells great stories about Bobo Baldi and Nakamura. Great story about Nakamura. But I had a laugh, actually, because you'll remember when there was no football one weekend and Celtic played a charity like Legends game against Feyenoord recently for the Wim Jansen Trophy. And it was only on the day that I noticed that Feyenoord TV were showing the game live. And had I noticed that in advance, JP, I probably would have done a watch along because there was nothing happening that day. But they weren't told that the referee was cameraed up, so they had the body cam. And Bruni's giving him the dogs abuse, so he talked us through that. No, he was phenomenal. Very, very good with everybody, every single person that approached him. We normally do a thing where it's like a VIP meet and greet, get your photograph, get a signed item and all that. And that's a wee bit earlier in the night. It's up in a mezzanine in the venue. And when it's finished, normally the player or the manager will come backstage, sit down, chill out. We've asked them what they want backstage, and they'll just relax for a bit before they come on. Bruni just stayed up there with the fans. Just stayed up there. And the fans were coming and speaking to him. And he was just chilling out with everybody, you know.
I used to work with his cousin, Natalie, when I worked in a previous life. When I wasn't doing what I do now, I was desperately trying to get out of it. But I worked with her, and I was privy to what he was going through with his sister that wasn't public because I spoke to her. I used to speak to her on lunch breaks and things like that at our work in Edinburgh. And yeah, I mean, I remember when it happened and everything else, like, because I think my flatmate at the time, or certainly became my flatmate, but he was really, really down on Scott Brown because remember he went through a really tough time at Celtic, and everyone was like, well, we've paid $4 million for this guy, where is it? Let's see it. It was exactly the same way as if you were to pay. Look at Ida, the amount of abuse he got. You don't know what's going on in Ida's life, you know. You don't know, but Scott Brown's sister was in really ill health, and I remember her telling me that he bought her for her 21st. I think it was her 21st. He bought her a brand new Mini because she always wanted a Mini, and I remember Natalie telling me that, and you know, because I knew that, I kind of absolutely pulled back on any sort of criticism or anything. Not that I was on a podcast at the time, but like, you know what I mean? I was just like a bit more sympathetic to his situation, and I'm really glad that the club stuck by him and the manager stuck by him at the time, and Ollie Burns was there obviously as well, and you know, that kind of, you were glad that he was with us and not anywhere else or where he could have been, you know what I mean?
No, without a doubt. And I think around about that time as well, he could have left Celtic. He spoke about Newcastle. Newcastle were serious about taking him down south, and he stayed where he was. And by the way, I'm thankful for it. Martin O'Neill last night spoke about the privilege that he had in coming back to Celtic. The privilege was all ours with Martin O'Neill. And it was the same with Scott Brown. Very humble. I really, really enjoyed it. Thanks everybody for coming out. Some people in the comments actually talking about it last night. Joe Hamilton Songs, Jungle Paddy, and all the other Acsom maniacs. Yeah, we are. We are a tribe of Acsom maniacs, absolutely. And there is Jungle Lion. Can't leave. Can't let Martin leave. Has to do something. So we've touched on that as well. Up until the point where he takes the job, his involvement in Celtic wasn't massive. I mean, I remember doing an event and being backstage, and he'd been approached for an event by Celtic. And I had spoken to him about something that had just happened. I think it was maybe a foundation dinner or something like that. He says, I barely hear from them. I barely hear from the club, you know, at that time. And every so often you would see him maybe coming in with a trophy or whatever. But he was not intrinsically linked to the football club, you know. So that's interesting. Maybe he's going to get more of an involvement, but just not a position at the club.
Yeah, I mean, he's a football manager. Do you know what I mean? And that was his job. He came in to do a job for us. There's no point in, like, unless he expressed desire or he had an idea for something that he could do, then the club agreed with it. Fine, but don't go just like, oh, Martin, can you do this? And here's a tie and everything else. And like, if that was to happen, then I would be more cynical about it than happy, because I would be thinking, are they just wanting him to be a shield or whatever? And
yeah,
you know, I felt bad for him that he had to go through that AGM. You know, it's got nothing to do with him. Absolutely nothing to do with him. He must have just been sitting there shaking his head, going.
I think he was quite bemused after it. I think.
Yeah.
When he was.
No doubt, because he must have just been like, "This is a nonsense." Like
nonsense.
You must have looked at it and thought, "You's only handling this well. You's definitely only hand." But he can't come out and say that, can he? He can't come, like, wait, people had a go at him for what he said afterwards and everything else. What else is he going to say? He's not going to come out and like lambast them.
This is it. This is the thing as well. When people like Martin O'Neill or Neil Lennon talk about Dermot Desmond, I think personally, I'm very much, it's the front end sort of me. It's the reaction saying, how can you? They've got a different relationship with the man. They've had different experiences with him. They have obviously been given jobs by this individual who is the subject of much wrath at the moment, JP. So I've got to consider the fact that Martin O'Neill and Neil Lennon and many others, Gordon Strachan, have got a completely different view. And actually, until recently, Brendan Rodgers would have been in this conversation. A completely different view of Brendan Rodgers than guys like you and me. So, yeah, we have got to take that into consideration. So, I mean, I thought it was interesting. I watched the game again this morning, as I do, so that I can get a good sense of it. I thought it was interesting how Jerry McCulloch now calls him the principal shareholder. They never used to call him that, but they do now, because I think obviously that this majority shareholder thing, or club owner, is something that has been kind of taken to task. It's been challenged by fans, by pods, by blogs, and it's now, well, actually, he's a massive shareholder. We spoke about what his dividends has been since he invested. We spoke about it yesterday, and it has definitely been an investment. How this turns out.
But what was it? 7.6 million or something? That's pocket change to him. Obviously, his entire, if he was to sell, it would be somewhere in the region of 100 million, right?
Yeah, 99 million. Yep.
Even then, that's probably not that much to him.
I think he dropped about $1 billion just 2 weeks ago, didn't he, by selling Barchester? I think he got $1 billion net. That was his share.
There you go. This is operating in completely different worlds. My only concern about if Dermot Desmond was to sell up would be to who he sells it to.
I know.
That's the concern, because there was an article the other day about the guy Foley that's pulled out of Hibs, and he's a mad Trump supporter and everything else. So, like, can you imagine how that would go down? Well, I'm not saying better the devil you know or anything like that, because I'm as annoyed as everybody else at that, and I'm not saying that we should live in fear of what may or may not happen, because then we're operating under the same auspices as they are by saying, oh, well, we need to watch our money because we might go bust or whatever. And it's like, well, no, that's not what we're saying. But yeah, time will tell us that. I mean, the guy's not getting any younger. His son's absolutely blowtorched himself in terms of what he's going to, his opinion amongst the Celtic, the opinion of him amongst the Celtic support is. So would there be any real desire for him to take over the reins? And my God, he would suffer if that was the case, in terms of, it would hardly be thousands of people outside Celtic Park to welcome him, would they?
No, I think I was going to say introduction. I think he's been at numerous AGMs over the years. However, this is really the first time he's been under the spotlight, I think, Ross Desmond. It depends on the character. If something like that happens to a certain individual, it might, prompt them to say, no, actually, I'm going to prove to you my worth. Or you can just go into that mode of, we know best. You are, I think John Hughes used the word plebs yesterday, which was the best word that I've heard so far. Use are plebs, and we'll just keep doing what we're doing. Now, I totally appreciate that you've got another appointment. You must dash. 2,100 plus watching the Thursday Bulletin. It is a new era. We will be here every step of the way to talk about every nuance of Celtic. Thank you, everybody who came last night. Thanks for everybody tuning in today. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and come back tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of Mind.